Uncertainty is the native soil of human existence. From the smallest decision to the grandest transformation, our lives unfold within a field of the unknown. The modern world, with its rapid technological advances, volatile economies, shifting climate, and fragile institutions, has made uncertainty not the exception but the rule. For many, this unpredictability is experienced as anxiety, paralysis, or chaos. Yet uncertainty is not simply a void of information. It is a fertile space of possibility. To move through it wisely requires a new mode of thinking, one that goes beyond the rigid categories of certainty and embraces the dynamic, interwoven nature of reality. This is where quantum thinking emerges, not as a metaphor borrowed lazily from physics, but as a conceptual framework that honors complexity, ambiguity, and potentiality as natural conditions of life. At its heart, quantum thinking challenges the linear and reductionist mindset inherited from classical logic. Traditional approaches to uncertainty often rely on prediction, control, and the elimination of ambiguity. In the Newtonian view of the world, everything is presumed to have a clear cause and effect, with enough data enabling one to calculate outcomes with near-perfect precision. This worldview has driven science, engineering, and even much of psychology and management. But in practice, human life resists such linear predictability. Quantum thinking does not attempt to deny this. Instead, it cultivates an awareness of uncertainty as a resource rather than a threat. Consider the quantum principle of superposition. A particle exists not in one state or another, but in multiple possibilities until observed. Applied to human perception and decision-making, this principle reminds us that life holds countless potential pathways in any given moment. Uncertainty, then, is not a deficiency of knowledge, but a field of possibilities awaiting conscious alignment. To navigate uncertainty through quantum thinking is to learn to dwell in this field, resisting premature closure and allowing multiple perspectives to coexist until the right course crystallizes. This reorientation is particularly powerful in times of disruption. Take, for example, the experience of a sudden career shift. The linear mind may focus on loss, the disappearance of stability, the collapse of identity, the anxiety of the unknown. But the quantum mind perceives the moment differently. The absence of the old structure is not merely an ending, but the opening of a superposition of futures. New skills, new environments, new modes of contribution, all latent in the uncertainty itself. The challenge is not to cling desperately to certainty, but to cultivate awareness spacious enough to perceive, hold, and eventually choose from among the many potentialities. This shift from fear to possibility requires more than intellectual acceptance. It requires a restructuring of perception itself. The observer effect in quantum physics teaches us that observation shapes reality. In human terms, this principle translates into the recognition that the way we attend to uncertainty profoundly influences what emerges. Anxiety, fixation, and resistance collapse the field into narrow, fear-driven outcomes. Curiosity, openness, and intentional focus allow entirely different realities to take form. To practice quantum thinking is to become a conscious observer, recognizing that uncertainty is never neutral, but always responsive to the quality of attention it receives. Yet this should not be misunderstood as magical thinking. Quantum thinking does not promise that one can control uncertainty or dictate outcomes simply by wishing them into existence. Instead, it emphasizes resonance and coherence. Just as particles align under certain frequencies, human intentions resonate with particular possibilities. Aligning with clarity of purpose, rather than clinging to certainty, creates a field in which the right opportunities can reveal themselves. This is not prediction, but participation, an active dance with the uncertainty that shapes our world. The application of quantum thinking to uncertainty is not confined to personal development. It extends to collective and systemic challenges as well. Societies face crises that cannot be solved through old linear paradigms. Climate change, for instance, is not a simple technical issue of reducing emissions, but an entangled reality involving culture, economics, politics, and ecosystems. Traditional approaches that isolate variables and seek single-point solutions often fail because they cannot account for the nonlinear feedback loops and emergent dynamics at play. Quantum thinking, however, encourages a holistic orientation, to see connections where others see fragmentation, to hold paradoxes without rushing to resolution, and to recognize that multiple potential futures exist simultaneously, demanding adaptive and imaginative responses. In leadership, this approach manifests as the capacity to hold vision and flexibility together. A quantum leader does not pretend to know every outcome or path. Instead, they create conditions in which innovation and resilience can emerge from uncertainty. They foster cultures of experimentation, where failure is not a verdict but a stepping stone to new configurations of possibility. They recognize that certainty is a mirage and that real power lies in navigating ambiguity with presence and creativity. To embody this form of leadership requires reconditioning the nervous system itself. The human brain is wired to seek patterns, predict threats, and cling to familiarity. Uncertainty triggers survival responses. Cortisol floods the body, narrowing perception and fueling fight, flight, or freeze. Quantum thinking works against this contraction by cultivating states of expanded awareness. Practices such as meditation, breath work, and mindfulness help train the nervous system to tolerate and even embrace uncertainty without collapse. In this expanded state, the mind can perceive connections and solutions that remain invisible under stress. At a cultural level, embracing uncertainty through quantum thinking also requires reframing our relationship to time. Linear thought treats time as a sequence of cause and effect, past determining present, present determining future. But quantum theory suggests time is less rigid. The future influences the present, possibilities ripple backward as well as forward, and what we call now is not a point, but a dynamic interplay of dimensions. When individuals approach uncertainty with this orientation, they cease to view the unknown future as a fixed destination and begin to experience it as a living field of probabilities, co-created with each choice of attention and action. This orientation transforms not only decisions, but also the emotional texture of uncertainty. Instead of dread, one may feel awe. Instead of panic, one may feel possibility. Instead of clinging to control, one may feel invited into co-creation with the unfolding fabric of existence. In this sense, uncertainty becomes not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Quantum thinking, then, is not merely a strategy, but a way of being, a willingness to inhabit paradox, to dance with ambiguity, and to trust that the unknown is not an abyss, but a fertile womb of becoming. Consider again the personal dimension. An individual facing the dissolution of a relationship may feel crushed by the uncertainty of identity and belonging. In linear thought, the narrative is one of failure and loss, with little beyond grief. But in quantum thought, the uncertainty is not emptiness, but a threshold. Who one becomes, what relationships arise, what creative forces are unleashed. All of these are possibilities latent in the disintegration of the old. The uncertainty is the liminal space through which new configurations of self and life can be born. In this sense, uncertainty is akin to the quantum vacuum, which physicists describe not as empty, but as seething with virtual particles, constantly flickering in and out of existence. What appears to be void is in fact the richest field of potential. Similarly, in human life, what appears as absence or chaos is often the very condition through which transformation occurs. Quantum thinking trains us to recognize this, to see through the illusion of emptiness, and to attune ourselves to the generative currents flowing through the unknown. There is, however, a paradox that must be acknowledged. Quantum thinking does not eliminate the discomfort of uncertainty. It does not promise serenity in every storm. Instead, it reframes discomfort as part of the process. Just as the quantum world defies classical logic, the human journey into uncertainty defies the tidy categories of certainty and control. The challenge is not to eradicate fear, but to hold it within a larger container of possibility. In doing so, fear itself can become fuel for transformation. Thus, the practice of navigating uncertainty with quantum thinking is not a one-time insight, but an ongoing discipline. It requires cultivating habits of perception, noticing when the mind contracts into linear certainty, expanding into multidimensional awareness, and consciously choosing how to direct observation and intention. It involves training the nervous system to remain present amid ambiguity, resisting the impulse to collapse possibility into premature closure. And it requires a willingness to view uncertainty not as a flaw in the system, but as the very structure of reality, the stage upon which all becoming unfolds. To deepen the practice of quantum thinking in the face of uncertainty, one must examine the subtle architecture of perception itself. Human beings are meaning makers, constantly weaving narratives to stabilize the flux of experience. These narratives are often built on the scaffolding of linear cause and effect. If this, then that. But when life presents situations too complex or fluid to be contained within such narratives, anxiety arises. Quantum thinking invites a different orientation, one that loosens the grip of narrative certainty and allows for the presence of multiple simultaneous interpretations. This is not chaos, but coherence at a higher level, where contradiction is not error, but a sign of deeper complexity. Take, for example, the concept of paradox. In classical logic, paradox is a problem to be resolved, a sign that the framework of reasoning has broken down. In quantum thinking, paradox is a natural feature of reality. Light is both wave and particle. Human beings are both individuals and ecosystems. Time is both linear and nonlinear. To navigate uncertainty is to dwell with paradox rather than eliminate it. The more one practices this, the more one sees that paradox is not confusion but richness, a clue that reality is more intricate than the mind's categories can capture. The practical implications of this are profound. When facing uncertainty, be it a personal crisis, a societal upheaval, or a global emergency, those who insist on certainty often collapse into rigid binaries: success or failure, right or wrong, safe or unsafe. This collapse limits perception and leads to reactive decisions. But those who embrace paradox can hold complexity without rushing to resolution. They can see how apparent opposites may both contain truth, how uncertainty may hide opportunity, and how endings may also be beginnings. In this way, quantum thinking transforms uncertainty from a battlefield of competing narratives into a laboratory of discovery. This transformation is not purely cognitive. It is also embodied. The body is not separate from thought, but its foundation. When uncertainty strikes, the body often contracts. Muscles tense, breath shortens, posture collapses. This contraction signals to the brain that danger is present, reinforcing fear. To counter this, quantum thinking emphasizes embodiment practices that ground the nervous system in openness. Slow, conscious breathing communicates safety. Expansive posture signals resilience. Movement disperses frozen energy. In these subtle ways, the body becomes an ally in maintaining spaciousness amid uncertainty. The quantum mind is not disembodied reason, but embodied awareness, sensitive to the feedback loops between thought, feeling, and physiology. Beyond the individual, quantum thinking also reshapes relationships. In times of uncertainty, groups often fracture into blame, polarization, or withdrawal. But when participants adopt a quantum orientation, they become capable of collective resilience. Dialogue no longer seeks, to eliminate disagreement, but to explore the possibilities it generates. Diversity of perspective is seen not as a threat, but as a form of superposition, a field of multiple viewpoints that may collapse into unexpected solutions. Teams that practice this kind of thinking are able to adapt creatively in uncertain environments, while rigid groups fracture under the weight of ambiguity. Consider a community facing an ecological crisis, such as a sudden drought. A linear response might fixate on scarcity, sparking conflict over resources. A quantum response, by contrast, acknowledges scarcity while also exploring creative synergies. Water-sharing systems, regenerative agriculture, new technologies, cultural rituals of conservation. The uncertainty of the crisis becomes not a death sentence, but a crucible of innovation. The community does not deny the difficulty, but approaches it with an openness to multiple possibilities, collapsing them into action through collective intention. Another dimension of navigating uncertainty through quantum thinking lies in reframing identity. Much of the fear of uncertainty arises from the ego's desire for a fixed sense of self. When circumstances disrupt this identity, the ego experiences annihilation. But quantum thinking recognizes identity as fluid, more like a probability cloud than a solid object. Just as an electron cannot be located at a single point until observed, the self cannot be reduced to a fixed category. It is always potential, always becoming. In uncertainty, therefore, identity is not lost, but liberated, free to reorganize into new patterns. To embrace this is to recognize that the self is not a noun, but a verb, a process unfolding within the wider field of life. This insight is echoed in spiritual traditions across cultures. The Taoist sage speaks of flowing with the Tao, never clinging to form. The Buddhist monk teaches non-attachment, recognizing impermanence as the fabric of reality. The mystic experiences union with a reality larger than the self, dissolving the need for control. Quantum thinking resonates with these traditions, not by replacing them, but by offering a modern language that integrates ancient wisdom with contemporary science. Uncertainty, once seen as a threat, becomes a sacred teacher. From this perspective, uncertainty is not merely external, but intrinsic to creativity itself. Every work of art, every scientific breakthrough, every social movement arises from stepping into the unknown. To create is to risk failure, to embrace paradox, to dance with ambiguity. Quantum thinking recognizes this and reframes creativity as the ability to move with uncertainty rather than against it. The artist who begins with a blank canvas does not see emptiness, but infinite possibility. The scientist confronting anomalous data does not see error, but the potential for new discovery. The activist facing overwhelming odds does not see futility, but the seed of transformation. In each case, uncertainty is not a void, but a womb. Even in the domain of technology, uncertainty is the condition of progress. The digital revolution, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, all are fields shaped by unknowns. The future of these technologies cannot be predicted with certainty, but it can be shaped by the quality of thought that engages with them. A linear mindset may seek control and dominance, leading to exploitation or catastrophe. A quantum mindset seeks resonance and responsibility, recognizing that technology is not separate from humanity, but an extension of its consciousness. Navigating technological uncertainty requires precisely the kind of multidimensional awareness quantum thinking cultivates. At the deepest level, uncertainty also confronts us with existential questions. Life itself is uncertain. Birth is uncertain. Death is certain, yet its timing unknown. And everything in between is improvisation. Quantum thinking does not offer escape from this reality, but invites a more intimate relationship with it. To live with uncertainty is to live with humility, recognizing that the universe is larger than our categories. It is also to live with wonder, recognizing that each moment is a collapse of infinite potential into the particular miracle of now. This orientation is not abstract, but practical. When one encounters the uncertainty of illness, quantum thinking encourages not only medical intervention, but also openness to the deeper transformations such an experience may catalyze. When one encounters the uncertainty of financial instability, quantum thinking encourages not only pragmatic planning, but also exploration of new ways of living and valuing. When one encounters the uncertainty of love, quantum thinking encourages not only the search for security, but also the willingness to be vulnerable, to discover connection in the very heart of unpredictability. Thus, uncertainty becomes the canvas upon which meaning is painted. It is not the enemy of stability, but its partner, reminding us that stability is always provisional, always contingent. To navigate uncertainty with quantum thinking is to release the illusion of permanence and embrace the truth of impermanence. Yet this impermanence is not nihilism. It is the ground of freedom. If nothing is fixed, everything is possible. If the future is not predetermined, it is alive with potential. This is the paradoxical gift of uncertainty. It frightens us because it strips away guarantees, but it also liberates us because it opens the field of the possible. In practice, cultivating this orientation requires daily effort. It requires noticing when the mind collapses into fear-driven narratives and choosing instead to open to multiple perspectives. It requires building resilience in the body through practices that anchor awareness in the present moment. It requires engaging with others in dialogue that honors paradox and diversity rather than demanding certainty. And it requires a willingness to act even when outcomes are unknown, trusting that each step shapes the unfolding field of potential. Ultimately, navigating uncertainty through quantum thinking is less about control than about participation. Life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a song to be sung, not a machine to be managed, but a dance to be joined. Uncertainty is the rhythm of this dance, sometimes chaotic, sometimes harmonious, always alive. The invitation of quantum thinking is to listen deeply, move freely, and trust that the music of uncertainty is the very sound of becoming.